David Brewster here with a new episode of Chordplay. This is the Chords of Guthrie Govan, and I've had some requests to feature more of Guthrie's music, and it was about 3 years ago when I made a three-for-all for Guthrie, and he also briefly appears in the Asia Chordplay episode, which I think that was from last year. But regardless, definitely Guthrie is a monster guitarist, and I've been following him technically since the late 90s. I discovered him in the pages of Guitar Techniques magazine, which I've been reading that for decades now. But definitely a brilliant guitarist, and he definitely hits like a lot of my favorite things, like the shreddy rock stuff, the fusiony jazz stuff, funky stuff. I mean, he's all over the place. I mean, he can melt your face off, but then also play some of the most expressive guitar I've ever heard. And I've seen him in concert a couple times with the Aristocrats and also Steven Wilson. And I actually met him at Summer NAMM many moons ago. And I also wrote a lesson for Guitar Player magazine in tribute to Guthrie. So definitely I'm a huge fan. So here we go. So if you're new to Guthrie's name and his music, definitely I'm going to share an image here with some of the people he's worked with in his career. And he's worked with a lot of really impressive people. He's also functioned as a solo artist, but he's worked with Asia and Steven Wilson, the Aristocrats. He's recently done some work with Hans Zimmer, soundtrack work. So here's two images. One image is like some of the groups and musicians he's worked with, and then the second image is some of the soundtracks that he appears in. Like I mentioned during the intro, I've actually met Guthrie 3 times. The first time was a Summer NAMM, and I'm not really sure of the exact year. It was 2008, maybe 2009, and he was there with Jamie Humphries from Guitar Techniques magazine, and they were playing at the Cornford booth, and I came around the corner, and there was Jamie and Guthrie just completely jamming. My jaw hit the floor, and then when they took a break, I ran over and talked to them, and they were shocked. They were like, "You know who we are?" And I was like, "Yeah, I read you guys every month in Guitar Techniques." And then I also met him at an Aristocrats show that was in Indianapolis, and also after the Steven Wilson, The Raven That Refused to Sing concert, that was in Chicago at Park West. Definitely a dynamite guitarist. And I've also written a lesson for Guitar Player magazine, that was November 2015, with Guthrie's Slippery Things. So definitely I've been a fan for a long time. So the music and chord-based examples in this episode came from 4 Guthrie Govan-related albums, and that's his solo album, Erotic Cakes, also 2 Aristocrats albums, and also an example from The Raven That Refused to Sing from Steven Wilson. So here we go. With the opening, that's the song Sweaty Knockers from the first Aristocrats album, and I've always liked that tune, something like this. Something like that. It's really involved. So we're basically playing around with this E5 power chord, and we're hybrid picking that like this. There's a series of fills right there after that hybrid picked E5. So do the chord. And that first fill. It's really tricky. So it's on the D string with that pull off G, E to the open D, and then the fretted D to the open D, then the fretted G to the low E open, and then grab that fretted E note right there. That's really tricky. Right? The second fill. This is really cool. So it's the high E open, the B open, and then this B flat to A, the high E open. Then you're going to grab this G and kind of bend it like a quarter step or a half step. And then you're gonna grab this E note and then end with the high E open, like that. That's really cool. Right back to that E riff. That's the third fill, so it's kind of like moving into that D to the open D string. Then the open A, C sharp to B, kind of like a pull-off slur. And then you're kind of doing that snappy kind of G to, you know, E thing again too. And then back to the... So you're kind of still playing with that E. He does a hammer on from the open strings with that fretted part, and then at the end he grabs G right there, like E minor technically, and then he's bending that G, you know, kind of up a half step in a way. And then you hear this busy single note riff. So right there, the like low E and this kind of chromatic move. So that's involved. That first time you end on E, the second time you go to D. And this last time you're going to grab this. So it's like an F sharp 7 add 11 like that. And then this really cool like chord, you know, kind of progression here. It's like a G6 to G sharp diminished, A major to B flat 6, and then it's like a B add 11 right there to C major, and then for a second there it's a D flat 7 sharp 9 like the Hendrix chord, but like that, and then that last little chord, that's a D add 9 like that. So that's really involved. Interesting chords there. And that's one thing about Guthrie's playing style. I mean, he's definitely not afraid of making some changes. I mean, he's obviously studied lots of jazz, so he totally whips out chord progressions and ideas like that all the time. Next up's the song Luminol. This came from the Steven Wilson album, The Raven That Refused to Sing, and I'm a huge fan of that album. It just resonated with me. I mean, I guess that was like 11 years ago now. But I saw that tour, actually did a concert review of that concert, met members of the band afterward, and they signed my tour program. You know, I bought the vinyl copy there. I've got the deluxe, you know, CD version. It's right over there. But, you know, huge album for me, a game changer. I loved it. And this is from Luminol, and you hear this kind of, you know, chord progression reappear like this. So it starts with a C sharp minor 7 right there, and then it's a D major 7 like that, and then it's E flat minor 7 like that, and then it's D major 7 again like this. So I love those twisting chords, you know, like in a progression where, you know, maybe just a few notes move and it kind of morphs and mutates like that. Really interesting chord progression. You know, I love stuff like that. Alright, next up's a section from the song Cocktail Umbrellas. This came from the Aristocrats album Culture Shock, and this actually takes place behind the bass solo. And I've always found it interesting when a great guitarist, you know, plays with a group where somebody else solos. I always like to study what they play, you know, comping or playing, you know, behind that lead. And this is true, you know, obviously from Guthrie Govan, but also Steve Morse and John Petrucci and players like that. You know, guitarists that play in a band where somebody else, you know, takes a solo. So this is behind the bass solo in Cocktail Umbrellas, and it's like this. like that. So we're moving into the C sharp minor 7 like this. So it's kind of spread out or spaced out like that. You want to pick through that again. And then you've got this A major 7 sus2 implied. And then it's a G sharp minor 7 like that. And then D major 7 like that. And definitely Guthrie seems fond of this kind of, maneuvering, into that major 7 chord. That's really interesting. But anyway, like this. Okay, next up, this came from Bad Asteroids. We're back on the original Aristocrats album, the first one. This is a really cool guitar part, like this. So we're kind of moving between this E minor 11 and this G sus2, right? And it's real crafty the way he's kind of hybrid picking, and he's kind of plucking and slapping and picking and different things in there. But he's doing this. And that's really tough right there, because you basically are keeping your middle finger and third finger down on that G and D notes on the low E and B string. But then your index and pinky are going to do that rapid kind of hammer-on pull-off while you're holding those two notes down. So talk about finger independence right there. Like that. That's really hard to do. And then back to that E minor 11. You hear him kind of hit that G sus2, and then he smacks a harmonic, and I'm just kind of basically hitting the 14th fret area right there, and that kind of produces, the necessary notes. Of course, it's matching that A note that we're holding down, but you kind of hear like that chime, like that. Okay, next up's the song Sevens. This came from Guthrie's solo album Erotic Cakes, and this is really cool, like this. Like that. So we're sliding this F to G octave. There's a lot of octaves going on here. And then right there you're going to grab that. And it's like a G minor 11 implied. Like that. And then more octaves, the C to D, and then B flat, and then B flat to C. And then right back to that F to G octave again. And then that G minor 11. And the second time it's just C to D to B flat octaves. Okay, last but not least, this is I Want A Parrot. This is from the first Aristocrats album once again. This is one of my favorite Aristocrats songs. It's kind of obnoxious, but I think that's why I like it. Like this. starts with this interesting kind of single note riff. So it's kind of like E major, right? And then basically move that down a half step. Now it's an implied E minor major 7. Now it's really cool, that little twist. And then that's kind of like E major 7, I guess, right there. And then, so he's doing these kind of big slides. Guthrie definitely loves doing slides, but then also kind of incorporating open strings, and he's got that big slip and slide kind of sound, like that. Right? Just playing off that open B, and then you start it again. That's really interesting right there. And there's a couple different ways you could think of that chord. Like that. Like how about a G6, flat 5, sharp 11, like that. Really interesting chord. And after you do that little chord move, play the open B there at the end and go right back into that major to the minor major 7 idea. And this, once again, really interesting stuff happening here. So that's like an E major 13 implied, and then that moves up to this, and that's like an E minor major 9 now. Really tasty, and definitely Guthrie is not afraid to take chances like that. He totally loves that kind of, that weird Twilight Zone, in chords like that. Definitely some kind of that higher shelf, fusion and jazz. Really tasty stuff. Of course, he's using the bar on those chords. I don't have a bar on my telly here. And go right back into the major thing again. At the end of that, then he starts doing this. Right? Which I love playing around with stuff like that, where you're basically, you're implying chords right there. You got all those droned open strings. Really tasty stuff. Right, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with this look at the chords of Guthrie Govan. Definitely a very dynamic and expressive, very important guitarist too. And I've been following him for a long time, like I mentioned during the intro. And it was from the pages of Guitar Techniques magazine that I discovered him and his music, and then to kind of watch him grow and, see some of his concerts and meet him, and then to really notice, like, he's just blown up in this world-class musician. Now he's working with, Hans Zimmer on soundtracks and stuff. The Aristocrats have a new album coming out. I think it comes out next month in February. It's a concept album called Duck. I think the entire album is about ducks, and that's right up my alley. It's like, yeah, I want to check out the Duck, instrumental Aristocrats concept album. That sounds amazing. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to my lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.